Good morning, Yvonne.
Good morning. Oh, no, it's afternoon here in Melbourne, I can
Oh,
tell you.
yes. So great.
It's still good though.
It's still it's still sunny.
Yes, the
Yeah.
sun is out. Do you know, I think I wrote some time ago whether the sun is out there is not really that important as long as the sun is shining in your heart.
So beautiful. Today we're going to go into solar frequencies, solar light. I have a whole range of thoughts that have come up around which I could share from both personal experience and but yeah, we're also giving ourselves a topic to kind of not know where this is going, which is great. I'd like to just head into the direction of the sun and have myself in many occasions been in meditative states to explore that realm a bit more beyond just looking at it from a distance or feeling the heat of it. And many spiritual teachers or even traditions have over the centuries, if not eons, always practice some ritual around sunlight. It's the bringer of life. None of what we see around ourselves here on Earth would exist without this beautiful ball of glowing energy and solar frequency that seems to be hanging in the sky. And I've had a few occasions in this meditative practice connected with the purity of the energy of the sun. And most times I wasn't actually able to hold it in my own body because it's so absent of any shadow, so to speak. And I'm curious around this sunlight coming from within, that we are like all other plant life and all other animal life, we are deriving a lot of our soul force, our energy force, our own light by being alive here on this earth and being exposed to that sunlight. Now, of course, we've had a bit of an agenda over the past couple of years, but really over the past couple of decades to kind of block the sunlight and put sunglasses on and put this cancer causing substance on your skin so that you don't get sunburned. And I get it, it's not intelligent for any human being with white skin to stand out in the sun in the middle of the day. But there's a lot of misconception and programming that I've had to kind of undo for myself in order to come to some sense of what is this? What is the purposeful function of the sun? Not so much on a physical matter level, but on that metaphysical level, in terms of what is it here to infuse us with, and how consciously open am I to that? And as I shared, I've had a few encounters with the purest energy of the sun myself, and noticed that I was kind of feeling really disturbed within my being as I was really kind of connecting and allowing that the frequency of sunlight and the archetypal intensity of it to come into my being and to kind of get my cells to resonate at a higher frequency. And they were kind of like a car on three pistons, like hackling a little bit. And what that experience led to for me is that for quite a while I did sun gazing to kind of familiarize myself with bringing in that solar light into my through my eyeballs into my receptors and being more present with the beauty and really what it could be offering me as insight into myself, into my cells. And after a while, I noticed that getting up at sunrise wasn't really my thing, because that is the so-called practice around sun gazing, to kind of connect more intimately with the electromagnetic frequency and the emission of light that at the early hours or at the late hours of the day is more palatable or um, more easy to be taken in. And so I started training myself to actually just being able to focus on taking in that sunlight at later times during the day. And then there's all these warnings and you shouldn't do that and that's all not healthy for you. And I'm curious what your take is on the programming around being afraid of the sun, being covering ourselves up from the sun. Certainly we don't want to look at the sun. We want to block all that sunlight out because we had a consumeristic kind of period where all of a sudden it was cool and hip to wear sunglasses, and that became a whole industry to kind of block out sunlight that is actually so relevant to us as humans. And from my comprehension, when we expose ourselves to sunlight naturally, vitamin D is being generated in our own bodily cells because of that activation. I just want to hand it over to you and see where you would like to take this, because it's an interesting topic.
I love how you do that. You just wonder about it and then you just hand it over to me and see what comes up. Well, what I'm really noticing more and more in this time of transition is that we are being called to come back to be in harmony with nature, because we're completely out of balance and we have forgotten that we are nature. We've forgotten how to interact with nature, and the sun is just something that is giving us life. Without the sun, there could be no life on this planet. So, unfortunately, again, we have lost connection with that thought. And yet we're naturally drawn to the sun. When it's a sunny day, we automatically feel better. When it's an overcast day, we feel it's more difficult to raise our energy when it's a dark day. When it's a sunny day, we open ourselves, naturally open to embrace and to absorb this sunlight, which is giving us life. And as you said before, it's about this. We have receptors in our eyes, right? That the sunlight goes in, and that is then triggers the body to start making vitamin D. So what happens when we keep putting sunglasses on? Well, that light is diminished. Therefore, the triggers that tell our body to make vitamin D is diminished. Therefore, 90% of the world now suddenly is vitamin D deficient. And what I have really become aware of over these last 30 years is that if we look back at the ancient cultures, they were guided by the stars. They did not think that we were the center of the universe. They knew that we were a part of a huge moving universe, and they were guided by that. They were guided by the position of the earth in relationship to the sun, to the moon, to the stars. And that they led their life according to that. And they lived in harmony. And many of the indigenous people, as you know, we love to go back there, still do that. And so what has occurred in the last 13,500 years or whatever, whatever, we always have to put labels on everything. But however many years, when someone came up with the idea of commercialism and industrialism and materialism, if there was money to be made of it, then let's do it. So that is where we've got so lost. You talk about sun gazing. Sun gazing is wonderful. If you get up in the morning and just look at the sun in the early morning hours, the sun does no damage to the eyes. it actually trains the eye to let in the light. No, you don't do that at 12 o'clock in the afternoon when it's at its highest, because it's too hot. Let's put some sense back into our brains instead of just becoming these programmed end product of do this, do that by somebody else. Listen to this body, and it knows when it's in its natural state. When you have fair skin, don't. Since when do we sunbake? And look, honestly, I spent hours and hours. I've got beautiful skin. My ancestry gave me beautiful skin. So I don't burn easily. But I too have laid out in the sun too long and burnt my skin. Ridiculous. What? So that I can become a little bit darker? Now, in Asia, everybody's buying stuff to try and look lighter. What is that? That is a commercial programming. We need to come back to nature and see sun as the gift of life, just as we talked about water being the gift of life. And so the more that we embrace the sun for what it is, the life-giving force, the conductor of energy that allows us to be happy, to be open. If you just think about it, get up in the morning, what do? I hope it's going to be a beautiful day. What do we mean by that? I hope the sun shines. So come back to that. Be grateful for that. Draw it in when it's there. As you said, breathe it in. Do your sun gazing. And then there is the natural process of the coming up of the sun and the going down of the sun. And when we learn to live in that fluid, symbiotic way with nature, then we might survive on this planet. And if we don't get back to that, we won't. I will hand it right back to you.
Wow. Yeah. I wanted to name this little conversation Children of the Sun. And to me, that is what I gleaned from my experiences, those early mornings sitting in the beginning of a new day. It's such a mysteriously beautiful and quiet space. And while I was doing that, particularly in Vanuatu, in the remote bush where I was residing, there was only vast nature around me. Like, not a billboard in sight, not a building to, get distracted by, nothing square. And it really gave me that time to recognize the immaculate beauty of this recurring cyclical pattern of the sun rising in my view, and the light changing from this kind of pinkish, darkish red to orange and becoming brighter and brighter. And it really allowed me to sense this kind of original innocence, this original relationship, this original sense of I'm a part of the earth, and I see myself as a child of the earth. And so we have Mother Earth that we are walking upon, that nourishes us, that clothes us, that feeds us, that gives us all the material needs. Everything that we use on earth comes from this earth. And then there's this beautiful glowing ball of light called Father Sun that gives rise to all living life, because every part that lives above the ground in the plant kingdom is really only growing because it's growing up to merge or grow up to connect with more sunlight. And in the process of photosynthesis that happens through the energetic exchange with light coming from the sun, the leaves expand. It's actually such a totally miraculous process that on a scientific level has been totally explained. But when we sit with it, and for instance, when we have a little tray of sprouts that we can observe growing as we expose it to light, it is such an amazing life-bearing principle that is here. And for me, coming into that kind of acute awareness of my humility and my humanness as a human being on this earth, that I've really cultivated this kind of relationship of being a child of the sun, being a child of the earth. And it's restored a lot of kind of innate softness that is very counter to what I kind of been programmed with, that I gotta somehow, work, I gotta do stuff, I gotta, produce, I have to. And I gleaned at certain moments that if I can just relax more and ease my own monkey mind more and be more of a receiver, then my life actually, with that, allowing that light in, it kind of emanates throughout the day with more ease and grace. And I found my navigation to be a lot more, well, at the time I would call it frolic and free and happy. I had a lot of stuff that I wanted to get done because we were building an intentional community in Eco Village. So I was pretty engaged, and at the same time, there was a lightness about it. And there's so much in the language that I have found back in terms of metaphorical allegories that we use when we speak, being lighthearted, feeling lighter, and not so much in sense of weight, but that word also relates directly to the brightness that comes with illumination. And so as I explored this all a bit more, I went down the history channels of my own learnings and my own findings to retrieve that so many traditions have had the sun really at their center point of their spiritual foci. That was really something that they orientated themselves around, and being with that in harmony with the annual, as we call it, or the solar year, and how that is a calendral system that is very different to what we actually, we've been told, we go around the sun 365 days, but once every 4 years, we actually don't do that. We just cut out a couple of days because our cycle, well, we're not going faster, but we have to kind of make up for the quarter of days that was inaccurate in our calendar. But we don't say that because this is just what we're using. And I'd like to go into this calendral system a bit that we are operating on, which has been really removed from a solar year into a kind of jagged up system of relating to natural time, into kind of what we call Gregorian timekeeping, and how that has actually affected our relationship with this divine emanation that meets and greets us every day, that showers the earth with solar infusion. And I'm curious if you have any insights around how we kind of got dislodged as a humanity by adopting these calendral systems that are no longer based on the moon, and they're no longer based on the solar year, but they're based on this man-made construct of irregular months with 31 days and 30 days, and then once every 4 years we throw in one of 28. How is that taking us out of our natural relationship? And where do you see that this relationship with the natural cycles as kind of predefined, or in their originality having always been this way? Where have you found this being still so alive in peoples around the earth? Because you've been here for a while, Yvonne. I'm sure you have some insight in that.
Well, it's an interesting subject you bring up because, again, it comes back to control, doesn't it? What you're talking about is this calendral system has been hijacked by the controllers of the world, the programmers of humanity for their benefit. And what is interesting, and most people probably aren't aware, but Greenwich, the Greenwich timekeepers, whatever, they have all this time up their sleeve they don't know what to do with. You say that, they keep having to adjust it because as this planet and this whole galaxy is constantly in move, therefore the time as we know it changes. And if we don't keep up in relationship with the galaxy and with our planets and adjust our time with that, then we get out of time with the whole of the universe. And that is where we find ourselves now. And so it's fascinating if you have a look at where the sun used to rise if you're living in the same house. I remember someone said to me one day, the sun used to rise over there from my window, but now I feel that it's rising over there in my window. And I just smile and I go, really? And that is the problem. As humans, we have lost that interconnection with the rest of the galaxy, with the planets. And so we just are trapped in this calendrical system that you talk about. And the journey we're on today is to find our way back, to start living in harmony and in relationship with the sun and with the moon, and find our way back to having a more fluid time rather than a calendrical time. And when we do that, that is when we start to have a physiological connection. We're all so out of balance with nature. And the sun is telling us constantly this way. We cannot live without this amazing energy that we are gifted every day. And how often do we say thank you? No, we don't. Most people just grumble when it's a bad day because the sun isn't shining. Well, how about if you get on your knees and say thank you when the sun is shining and absorb the light of it into every cell of your body consciously? Because that is what it's offering you. So that when you have the days where the sun isn't able to shine upon you, you have stored that energy within your cells and you are okay. And then you can shine the light that you've got stored, you can shine that out. But no, we just grumble. And then we blame something, blame the clouds, blame the rain. We have become such a society of and a collective humanity of looking for blame out there somewhere. Something has changed. Something isn't right. Someone's messing with our weather. Somebody's doing that. Rather than coming home and appreciating what we have when we have it and using it in balance, not out of balance. So yes, this calendrical system has hijacked us, has taken us away from our natural fluidity in relationship to the planets, in relationship to the stars, in relationship to the universe and the galaxy. And that is what this whole transition for me is about. It's this understanding that we are coming out of these dark ages and the planet is now on its trajectory. And it does it consistently. I was listening to Bruce Lipton this morning, who's just, a fan. I'm a fan, you're a fan, we know. He's a brilliant man. And he talked about the death of the sixth extinction, or however he puts it. And it is all about this understanding that we go through cycles where we become so out of whatever is living on the planet, whether it's humanity or whatever, anything that becomes out of balance with nature on this planet ends up going into extinction. And humanity has taken itself to a place where it either comes back to becoming part of nature, or it becomes extinct because the planet will keep moving where it's going to move, and it will not sustain anything out of balance anymore. And so this is a time where we need to come back to having reverence for the sun, having reverence for the stars, having reverence for the water, having reverence for all the elements, and having reverence for Mother Earth, because we have done so much damage to Mother Earth. And so the damage we've done to Mother Earth is reflected in the damage we've done to ourselves. And for me, it's all about coming back to this understanding that the solar energy is an energy that we need to embrace and we need to connect with, but consciously seeing why. Why is that sun so important to us? What does it do to my body, to my mind, to my heart? How does it affect me in here? And when you really relate to that, it's not about lying in the sun and getting darker so you look a bit more buff or whatever that means. And I've been there. And it's not about being afraid of the sun because it might do harm to our skin. It's about having a relationship to the sun of understanding, of harmony, of symbiosis, as you talk about so often. And that is what we need to come back to, the reverence of all the beautiful gifts that come to us every day that we've forgotten to be grateful for. That's how, and being children of the sun, we are children of the galaxy. And we need to start to become a harmonic part of that.
So beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, in my own encounter with many indigenous peoples over the years and their relationship to what they call God, they have very much conveyed their own understandings of being intimately connected with the sun as a presence of God. And it was interesting that when I studied Egypt in Egypt, the whole, well, I don't think that it was called Egypt really, but this Egyptology and all the worship around Ra, the sun, it became very apparent to me that the relationship to the understanding of the influence and the relevancy and the celebrating and the honoring and the spiritual reverence that was actively lived in relation to the sun as being seen as the singular God archetype, so to speak. It for me became an interesting quest to kind of discover what is it that makes me kind of unconsciously take for granted that there is even a sun, that I don't have a pre-existing appreciation, but I have an innate one, as you spoke to in the beginning. And we wake up in the morning and we hope that it's going to be a sunny day, and yet that hasn't really been fostered throughout my life because that spiritual relationship was in my family totally sidelined, from the sun to Jesus, which is the Son of God, which when we trace back most of the spiritual traditions on the earth, they all have the sun as a great centerpiece to their orientations. I don't want to use the word religious orientations, but as their life ways. And I went on that path of exploration to discover, like, why is it that there is an innate excitement for a bright day and sunshine and to be able to go outside and be active, and yet at the same time there seems to be this whole realm almost that I have not been kind of cultured into, and instead I've kind of been programmed to look in other directions that have more of a material based kind of focus. That has really led me to have a bit of an absence of a relationship. And so in my days of sun gazing and really questioning through this entropic lens, what is the purposeful function? What have I all been told about sunlight? Well, all the light spectrum stuff and all the stuff that I learned in school about what it is and what it isn't. And that kind of narrowed down level of knowledge, or really just information that I would be able to regurgitate, so to speak, has been what has been imparted on me as a human in the Western world. And I really kind of went on a searching for how can I deepen my relationship with the natural cycles, with the natural rhythms, and how can I open myself up with this willingness to be curious, to look beyond my programming, to look beyond what I know about light. Here's one such image that showcases that the light that comes from the sun is much more than what we know to be our visible light spectrum. And there are so many more wavelengths and wave variations that have been identified through mostly warfare driven industries that have kind of developed technology, how to produce all these different rays through technology, but they're all replicating to one degree or the other only the already existing natural light spectrum that is so broad and it's so rich. And so I've sat with that question, like, is it just the visible light spectrum that makes life grow? And during my study in syntropic agroforestry with one of my beautiful mentors and friends, Jane Hawes, I was able to come into an awareness that there are so many different types of light. And that is a whole conversation in of itself. And I am not qualified to speak on the subject, but we're not talking about this image that I just shown about all these different kind of wavelengths that have been made 2D. Obviously, they look like that, but they are actually all spirals. They are not straight lines. There's so much more to all of that. But one of the things that I became really curious with is like, wow, there are different shades of light. There are different colors in light that have different effects on different plants, and their plants are actually wired to produce different types of fruit based on the light spectrum that they are more receptive to, and but have co-evolved with nature through. And so I started to discover that a lot of the foods and the fruits that we eat, and the reason that they have the color that they have, is not necessarily just based because they're genetically created that way or formed that way. It's that they absorb a specific frequency of light into their leaf structures that then produces fruit of specific colors. And so this color spectrum is a very, very influencing format. And so then I became curious, like, oh, so oranges are picking up more of the orange light. And all of a sudden my kind of exploration of, well, how am I then receiving sunlight? And then I learned that eating fruits is like eating liquid sunlight. Eating vegetables is like eating consolidated life force, co-created through the existence of light that has infused itself to have it be a purple carrot or an orange carrot. And it's been a really interesting exploration because what it did, it shifted my whole focus from a tomato and a cucumber and a watermelon and an apple in the supermarket or the supermarket, to being like in that childlike state of like being in awe. It's like, this is a fruit that has absorbed mostly the light spectrum in the bandwidth of red light, and this one. And so all of a sudden my whole shopping experience, and I was running also a local fruit and vegetable social enterprise at the time called Real Food Network. And so whenever I was on the farms and whenever I was, all of a sudden my worldview opened up. And I didn't have a lot of people to share that with because it sounds a bit cuckoo. You know, they just call it a tomato. So it's just a tomato. It's not a fruit from the earth that is absorbed, particularly the red light spectrum of sunlight, to produce this beautiful outcome. But again, it's about that children of the sun kind of orientation that allows this exploration and that curiosity of, I never was told any of that in school, or maybe I was sleeping during biology class, but I never was informed that the fruits that produce different colors have absorbed certain spectrum frequencies and colors of the sunlight in order to become like that. And I just found it such an intriguing period of time where I was almost like in a new wonderland, walking around, observing the absorbed light codes in manifested physical form. And it allowed me to connect with the eating of the fruit in a different manner as well. So I kind of came full cycle of not just unconsciously eating a tomato and putting it on a sandwich, but being like, oh, wow, not only is it round, it is carrying a frequency of light that therefore then also relates to different receptor sites within my own cellular metric that then take that consolidated sunlight and use that, because the color spectrum in fruits and vegetables then creates different vitamins, different nutrients, different, wow, it is a vast realm of what so peacefully and so quietly and so recurringly, I would say, the sun brings about, that in the past I had so little awareness of. And just that curious exploration has, just given me an expanded sense of what sunlight is capable of doing, what it is doing, what it has been doing, and finding that renewed appreciation beyond the boxed and the labeled knowns of what this fruit is and what that vegetable is. It's been a very, very lovely kind of return to innocence, but also an expansion on what I was told in class, what I was told in school. I wanted to go into a little bit around the different light color frequencies and how they relate to human consciousness. And knowing from the soul frequency readings that I've been following that people do all over the world by means of measuring that either through their own bodily inner knowing, the sun has been measured to be like the peak of consciousness. It's the highest on the scale. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts around the frequency of the sun and how there's a lot of talk that sunlight is actually increasing in intensity, and how that is affecting human consciousness.
Well, I would like to just go first to, you talked about Egypt and the god Ra. My experience of really coming home to relating to the sun from a heart connection is my shamanic journey in Peru and South America. And of course, everything over there, the ancients built everything in a way that they actually measured where the sun came up and at a certain point of the day where it would shine in its most intensity. Everything that they've ever built was focused on where the sun was going to go. and they are the greatest sun worshippers. And I remember when I arrived at Cusco and I was in a hotel called, this Hotel of the Sun, and I looked outside my window of my room, and there was right in front of me this enormous sun greeting me every morning on it was a hand. I can't find the word. It was not the natural sun, it was a picture of the sun. But it was right outside my window, and everything there is the Incas had this, and the Mayans, because I did also do a lot of work with those cultures. They were so focused on the sun. And when you look at those people and you look how they dress, I always loved the brilliant colors that they dressed themselves in, which was a reflection of what you're talking about, of the vibrancy of the sun and the frequencies of the colors. And it's gone a little bit out of fashion these days, but there was a time in the early days of my journey, there were a lot of color therapists that came out and recognized that whatever color you wore affects your frequency. And I do that every morning. I connect to everything in my wardrobe to see which frequency feels in alignment with me today. And that is really important. If people just recognize that the frequencies of the color spectrum have such power, and it has to do with the electromagnetism that we are all a part of. And so when you talk about the intensity increasing, that is because our sun that we put so much emphasis on is only a small star of the greater galaxy, which is fueled itself by the central sun, Alcion, which of course sends its rays to the suns, which are then deflected onto the earth. And as we are moving into this new phase within the galaxy, this is altering. And as a result, the ultraviolet rays that are coming from Alcion to the sun and to us are increasing. And if you are a little bit of aware, then you realize the sun is actually feeling stronger. Now, that would make people go, more, we've got to put more stuff and hide more. No, we have to just learn to adjust ourselves. And those frequencies are helping us to lift our frequencies. We need to lift with it, not hide from it, because it is a huge gift. This is where our lifting consciousness occurs. We have to become a part of it and realize that we are the children of the sun, children of the earth. And when we know how to adjust our ways, but what we've been programmed to do is to control. Oh, well, we have to control that now. So what can we do to not be affected by that? Well, I would say, let go of the control and be affected by that, because it is lifting us. It is lifting the light. The lighter, you talk a lot about, we are drawn to the light. So why hide from the light? The intensity is going to increase, not to be afraid of, but to enlighten us, to become lighter in every part of our being, to absorb the frequencies, to breathe them in, to allow ourselves to be upgraded, because that's what we're in the process of. We're being upgraded with nature if we get the message. And so every day it is about becoming more and more in tune with that and recognizing that we are not the center of the universe. We are a part of a moving universe that is continuously changing, And attempting to control it is pretty absurd for me. Learning to live with it, to be a part of it, to rejoice in it, to thrive with it. And when you talk about this wonderful process of the leaves taking in the sun, and some plants like more light than other plants don't like more light. Well, can you imagine? Think of yourself of a leaf. We are the leaves of the tree of human life. And each one of us, some we need more light, others we need less light. One of the things that always amuses me about people's different skin colors is because we were created in a place where the sunlight is different. So our skin is according to the vibrational frequencies of a color that is most conducive of keeping the human form in a symbiotic state of nature with that part of the frequency. No, no, no. We have made that something that is either right or wrong or something. What have we done to ourselves? What have we done to being of nature? What have we've got so lost? And so the frequencies, yes, they are increasing. Get used to it. Get in the flow of it. Absorb it. Revere the sun, the stars, the water, the moon, and revere us as a part of it all, not as a controller of it all. And we will live many, many thousands of years in the light.
I want to dive a bit into this somehow perceived need, which is I find very obscure, to spray all sorts of chemicals and nanoparticles into our skies already for decades. And many people are aware of the fact that so-called chemtrailing has been part of a black book agenda. There's still very little disclosure around that subject, and I am very well aware that we have a large group of super psychopaths being in positions of power that find that a very relevant thing to invest billions and billions and billions of dollars into, to kind of what is called geoengineer the larger ecosystem, the macro ecosystem of Earth as a whole. And many tests have soil tests and that have been done back in the 80s that made it very clear that there was some really heavy duty stuff that was severely damaging to plant life, soil life, human life, was being sprayed into the atmosphere by the industrial military complex more than anything. And for me, it became apparent very early on that, well, the only reason that they would do that is, these super psychopaths are all about controlling humanity. And so outside of the negative impacts of all the aluminum and barium and all these nanoparticles that are being put up into the higher atmosphere, they are supposed to stay there because there is such a thing as a changing of climate. And these days on places where we're streaming, we can't actually have normal conversations neither anymore. But what I find interesting about the secret and behind government doors and even behind government's awareness that all these programs have been rolled out in every westernized country, and public public protests, public demands for the freeing up of information through FOI documents have all resulted in very little disclosure on the whole subject. And yet all these governments seem to be totally in the bed with just permissioning it and allowing it to continue. And to me, it's like, well, if the objective here is to block out the sun, and if that blocking out of the sun is helping us fight climate change, what climate is really changing? And to me, this Earth being a planet of consciousness, there seems to be some pre-existing awareness that the changes that our sun is going through and the intensification of its frequency and the emission of what it distributes across the whole Earth every day is something that is wanting to be controlled, curtailed, blocked. We've got, I call him Uncle Bill. He has a very distorted fantasy with which he is going more and more public. And apparently recently it's been noted that he may have to put a little pin in that fantasy to go and block out the sun for all of humanity, because there's no substance to the fantasy. If anything that we could say about the changing of climatological circumstances or measurable effects is that we don't necessarily have rising sea levels, as to the extent that we say that we, or see that science is declaring that. What we instead have is an influencing factor on climatological cycles that is somehow, without the public being informed of it, being tampered with, being blocked. And to me, it is that it seems from a spiritual perspective in relationship to this process of awakening and our consciousness frequency rising, whether we are fully partaking in that or whether we are very ignorant and unaware of the frequencies intensifying and rising of themselves. I see a direct correlation to the sun, and I studied Greg Braden's work 2 decades ago around that whole topic and got very obsessed with the whole solar flares and how they are instantly having ramifications on microbiological life that were being able to be measured, and so many advanced kind of measurings have been done. But the beauty of Greg's work that I found is that it was intimately tied to a spiritual awakening process. And so that allowed me at the time to kind of deepen my journey in my relationship with the sun and to deepen my own conscious reflections on a climate that was changing. And I don't personally, how I see that whole narrative playing out is that we want to have climate change action all around the world. Climate has been applied to nature, but that's not what the word actually means. Climate is a series of conditions that exist, and they are applicable to every ecosystem, including our human ecology. And so I see that humanity's climate is changing, and we're rapidly awakening, and that's being kind of hurtled into this like, oh, it's happening out there, and you should all start paying climate tax for, having incandescent light bulbs, which are way better than LED light bulbs. Maybe not more energy efficient, but certainly more of a natural form of light dispensation when it's dark. I've really come to kind of sit on the sideline and look at it all, with the narratives now being populated faster and faster around this blocking of sunlight and what's happening by the repression of everyone's freedoms in the Western world, or the westernized world, let me put it that way, that there's a direct correlation going on here to the increase of intensity of sunlight that we are actually receiving. And the question becomes, how do I step out of all that rah and all that attention grabbing information and invert that back knowingly, or knowing that it's it's an agenda. And so if the agenda is trying to ascertain something, which is me fearing the sun, covering my skin from the sun with cancer-causing chemicals, and then believing in a whole bunch of stories about that, we need to do these things because, whoa, the earth is changing, from a control-driven orientation, I would say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense if you want to stay in control. Yvonne, what's really happening if we talk about the frequency of the sun increasing, these very long solar cycles? Give us your synopsis of what you feel, and from an experiential place you have come to recognize is being both suppressed, but really what is being suppressed in our human consciousness.
I just love that. Well, all I've got to say is all the Uncle Bills, as you call them out there, knock yourself out. Because what is occurring as a result, and this is, this is spiritual warfare. We have been programmed into submission for so long, lost our way from knowing that we are a natural force, the same as the leaves and the trees and the earth and the sun and the planets. And so I see that the movement we're going through at the moment, the intensity of the sun is also cleansing. So these higher frequencies are obliterating all the shadow work that has been done upon this planet for a long, long time. And what is occurring is this bifurcation that we now see with those people that are so deeply programmed and still lost, but not forever. And then those of us who have done the work, who have come with a higher state of consciousness that is more aligned to seeing the journey that we're on as a humanity, as part of this whole process. Then you and I keep coming back to New Earth communities, because what I see as a result of, and this idea of coming back to our sovereignty, because the more that these psychopaths, as you call them, and I don't like to label people, I just see them people of contrast that have signed up to be the alternative for us to look at and say no to. And I'm very grateful, because they're getting tougher and tougher, and it's easier and easier for me to say no to it, because my heart doesn't resonate to it. My soul doesn't resonate to it. My light doesn't resonate to it. So what is occurring is that I see in our New Earth communities, I can't tell you how many people are creating community gardens, sharing, growing their own food, sharing things together, becoming incredibly creative, finding talents within themselves that they never gave themselves permission to express in. And so there is this huge shift that is occurring as we come back to our sovereignty. What does that mean? It means it comes back to us becoming self-responsible or self-respondable, and we become back to becoming self-sustainable, and taking our power away from the controllers, taking it back and becoming once more part of the process of creation as we move into this new phase of the human evolutionary process, this going from Homo sapien to whatever you want to. Barbara Marx Hubbard had this lovely phrase of we're going to the Homo Universalis, and then somebody else added something and it became a Homo Universalis Galactica, which is all about coming back and becoming a part of the whole of this universe, rather than this delusional separate thing of being the masters of something that you can't hold. I could get very, very crude and say, how do you put a fart in a bag? That is really what they're trying to do. And it's not possible. Well, I don't think it's possible. I've never tried, but you know what I mean. It is so crazy that we even consider that we have any control ultimately upon climate, because this planet has changed its climate. Its weather is really what we're talking about when we talk about climate. We're talking about temperatures. And so that's continuously changed. And I know that for many years now, we will be going into a global Mediterranean type climate. And that's not a bad thing. That is just how this universe operates, how this planet keeps moving and changing. We've had ice ages, we've had floods, we've had all of these things. And no Uncle Bills, no matter how hard they want to block the sun, are going to be able to do that. And it is up to us, the ones that are becoming more aligned with nature, that see the absurdity of it all and are starting to bring ourselves back to that place and creating these new earth communities where we are living in harmony, in peace, in love, in prosperity for all, because there is sharing and caring. And that is the new earth that I'm moving towards. That's all that I give attention to. And you say, well, how do we stop, being distracted? Well, just don't give it any attention. Just keep saying, it's about becoming the observer, not the observer. So you don't observe it, you observe it. You leave it out there and you go, oh, that's not for me. That's not my vibration. That one is. So bring in the light and leave the dark behind. That is really my process that I've come to after all these years of coming to a place of inner peace and alignment with nature and love. And that's all that matters to me. If it's not of love, I don't play. Pretty simple. And that is love of the sun, love of all the gifts of nature,
Yeah.
love of humanity.
So beautiful, Yvonne. I was just reflecting on, where has anything to do with the sun in relationship to programming been diminished or relegated to some realm of superstition, or people that were, I don't know, natives or not civilized. And yeah, it just came up for me that sun worship has been an intricate part of indigenous peoples all around the world in relationship to their direct spirituality and their connection to source, their connection to nature, their connection to life and the greater patterns of the universe. And it's been called sun worship. And it's written about in ways that it's kind of like, it's mythological stuff. It is, people entertaining fantasies like, why would you go and worship the sun? And that whole word worshiping something, which in religious terminology, worshiping God is totally fine, but then worshiping the, if we believe in God and we believe that God created the sun, to then worship the sun, what does it even mean? It's having great reverence for the amazing existence and the presence of such. And I just came to that sense of like, how about I start sun worshiping and actually uncovering this whole word and the whole this religious language that have been sort of covered over very ancient and very beautiful and very earthbound and very natural ways of relating to life, and then some language has been put over it that kind of relegates it to a realm of, oh well, yeah, these people didn't really know what they're doing because look, they weren't driving cars and going to their jobs, and they weren't making money and going on holidays, so what would they have known? And it's like, yeah, I'm gonna become a sun worshiper. That's going to be my new thing. I just wanted to bring that in here at the end because I really see that we've been so lured and told stories and narratives through our education in the place called school to kind of relate to really intimate relationships that are not of the intelligence, that are not explainable through the intelligence, but are a heart-based relationship. We've been really kind of duped to believe different things. And what I love about what you just shared is really giving our light. So I receive this light that I eat, the light that I drink, the light that I receive directly from the sun. I am a manifestation of that light. And what am I using my light for? Am I going to be trying to figure out how I can shine light in the darkness so that I can illuminate that? Well, some people feel that to be their calling. I feel that my current place is really to bring my light and my life force to the new, to the fresh, to the natural, and to the real with that, because all of that other stuff is not necessarily unattractive or even negative. It's just giving it energy, as you say, is a choice. And what does it foster within myself when I do give that energy? Well, I know what it feels like. It's not nice. And it stops me from having energy to bring in the new, to cultivate the conversations like we are cultivating around the direction where we are actually going to become more prosperous, more collaborative, more happy, more peaceful, and more sovereign in our own way of being and standing on the earth. I think this is a beautiful, beautiful conversation to dive into with you, Yvonne. And I'll leave the last closing words for you, if you feel to share any more. And maybe next week we can talk about worship.
Well, I was about to finish with worship.
Great.
Because to me, worship is something external. And there is, there are some people who talk about this now being the time of the sixth sun, which is we're coming out of the time of the fifth sun, which is about externalizing everything, looking outside. The time of the sixth sun is about internalizing everything. And for me, worship is outside. We worship something outside. And really, what my relationship to the sun is inside. It is with gratitude and appreciation and reverence, and the ability to, as you say, bring that light in and then use that light consciously to radiate it out into the world and light up the world wherever I go. Which is my daily intention. So I do hope that today we have lit up a few people's lives by our chit chat. And I just keep radiating the sun from within as I breathe in the sun every day as it comes to me as a gift. So thank you once more for a very wonderful conversation. And may I just, sorry, I was going to say, may I just, because it's only a few days before Christmas, may I wish everyone a very, very happy holiday season, whatever, creed or religion, non-religion, culture you come from. This is a time for love, for bringing people together, for letting go your differences and embracing life
So
as
great.
it's meant to be.
And depending on where you are in the world, it is also the period of the return of the sun.
Absolutely.
So beautiful. Thank you, Yvonne. Ciao for now.
Ciao.